It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
And this sound right here means, yes, there it is. Okay, so that sound means that it is time for our newest Conservative Future segment, where we interview young conservatives, and we kind of find out, you know what's on their minds. Please welcome to the program. For the first time, we have Alice Norman is on the line. Alice, welcome to the program.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So the way these work, we just really want to know, there's not a lot of people who are young who end up being conservative. Winston Churchill said, I think, if you're young and liberal, you don't have a heart or something, but if you're old and not conservative, you don't have a brain. I might have messed that up, but you know what I'm saying. In the college world, the college campuses, it's just not very popular. It doesn't seem to be a conservative. So, Alice, I'm just curious, how did you develop a conservative worldview?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of people who are drawn to liberalism, being young, feel like it's all about good intentions. And I feel like I'm more of a pragmatist. I like solutions that work. And I think I've always been conservative. But, just growing up and seeing different things in Mississippi, internationally, for example, I did a study abroad in Mexico that was really eye-opening for me. I think it just confirmed these solutions I saw anyways.
So you grew up in Mississippi, and you're out of college now, right? Where'd you go to school?
Well, I just graduated this month from the University of Mississippi. I graduated with degrees in public policy and marketing communications. Awesome,
that's fantastic. So, let me ask you this: was a conservative worldview welcome at Ole Miss? Or was there, like you said, just a lot of people who just really get hung up maybe on the rhetoric of good intentions, but not the outcome of what those policies produce?
Well, surprisingly, I feel like the University of Mississippi, which has historically been conservative, is really charged right now. These last 4 years, I remember, every class, even down to like my geology classes, my basic, just get out of the way classes, we always talked politics, and I felt like a lot of my peers and a lot of my professors were very left-leaning, and to express openly conservative views, you're almost discouraged from it. You have to use discretion when discussing what you believe.
Yeah, did you ever think that maybe, you're going to get a bad grade or something like that?
Well, particularly with my major in public policy, going into the major, it's a small group, so I think my graduating class was about 50 people in that major, and we all sort of collaborated and knew which teachers leaned what way, and we figured out pretty quickly that writing our papers, with discretion towards those views would get us a better grade, which, coming out of high school was a big surprise to me.
Yeah, that's a shame too. I had a similar experience when I was in college, and I took a history class. And you'd have thought if you said one negative thing at all about FDR that conflicted what the teacher thought about FDR, and I just learned really quick, well, I've just got to take the test and get out of here, because it's just, you have to make those calculating decisions. We're talking again with Alice Norman. She's on our Young Conservative segment, or Conservative Future segment. So Alice, what do you think about the state of politics today in the country? What's the state of conservatism or republicanism or limited government? What are your general thoughts? What are some issues that are important to you?
Well, for me personally, I believe that individual rights outweigh collective rights at any given point, and I feel like, overall, Republican and Democrat, this has shifted to just taking more and more rights and applying it to policies that sound conservative or liberal. But really, it should be about preserving individual rights for people. And I feel like that's disappearing from the rhetoric, and more the conversation is moving away from that.
Yeah, it certainly is moving away from that. We have examples of, and I love what you said. You said it sounds conservative, And we've got examples of that here locally in Arkansas, where there's this attempt to make what they're doing sound conservative, but if you actually dive into the policy, it's the opposite. And it, in many cases, it just goes completely against the platform that many of these people claim that they believe in and support.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just frustrating. So back to you being a young. Are you 21, 22? Is that how old you are?
I am newly 21.
Okay, nearly 21. Well, I mean, I know there's a lot of young people who are engaged on the left. There's not as many of young people your age who are engaged on the right. Have you encountered any like Trump derangement syndrome, is what they're calling it now? I mean, I've talked to people who are my age that have Donald Trump getting elected has ruined their lives in some cases, and I don't get it. But I mean, did you encounter any of that, and does that produce like an apathy, or does that make people like double down even more?
Well, absolutely, especially like in the context of just coming out of the university. I remember the day he was elected, I had peers going to my professors talking about how, it's the end of the world and there was going to be a revolution and all these things. And I mean, it was just totally obscene and crazy. And I feel like in some departments, specifically, I remember the sociology department and the honors college, which I was involved in, there would be like signs on our professors' doors about, all of Trump's lies, or this would be a safe space to come and, be free of all political conversations and whatever else. And it just seemed like totally far-fetched and ridiculous to me.
Yeah. Freedom of speech, though, like that doesn't really exist anymore on college and a lot of college campuses, right? I mean, and that's a disturbing trend. You mentioned safe spaces, or this right to not be offended. It's like, wow, I mean, these universities are now really the opposite of what classical liberalism was all about. And you used to could find classical liberalism in our universities, like the concept of freedom of speech and being a counterculture. Now they don't even want to debate. They want to shut down speech. That's disturbing to me. Is it disturbing to you?
Oh, absolutely. And it's definitely one-sided, too. It's not like the university is promoting just this objective, free, safe space for everyone to come and, just have, a shared set of facts. It's definitely one-sided, leaning left. So I remember, for example, I can't remember which group it was. I think it was Turning Point USA, tried to set up a student-led table during elections week. And there's tons of tables out there for, Green Week and whatever else. And the professors came out, and even though the Turning Point or conservative table or whatever it was had the same paperwork as every other table, they were asked to leave repeatedly and told they couldn't be there. And to me, that just seems, it is really unfair and one-sided.
Yeah, I mean, what it is open discrimination. I'm wondering if, me and Joe talk about this all the time in the disputes that I have with Republicans. Like, we can't agree on the definition of words and phrases anymore, and I think that's a huge problem, a communication problem. But I think over on college campuses, it's almost like they're either the ends justify the means to them. So they think because they're discriminated against or victimized just because, and then that somehow gives them the right to discriminate against others. But I would say they're not being discriminated against. Like the whole concept of the First Amendment and Western civilization is being able to discuss and debate ideas and do it in a civil manner and not try to silence and shut down. And that's what's so scary to me, Alice, is, it used to be, we used to love our freedom of speech in this country. And now we have, and young people used to be the biggest proponents of it. They were the ones that were exercising via protest and everything else. And it's like, if these are our future leaders, obviously I'm excluding you because you're a conservative, but if our future leaders are okay, and they're in college campuses now, and they're okay with just not allowing the other side to speak, we really need to be praying for our country, because if those people get into power, they will use the government like a third world dictator would. That they're the real fascists because they don't believe in the freedom of speech.
Absolutely. And I also think, adding on to that, that liberalism indoctrinates people to believe they're dependent on circumstances, that they're victims of what life brings them. And I think that's a different operating assumption than what conservatives operate on, which is, that opportunity is possible for everyone, that everyone has a chance to do something meaningful and incredible with their lives if they just put in enough hard work. And I think that's where, I guess, young people come off thinking that they need to be protected from words, especially if they're left-leaning.
Yeah, and that's extremely frustrating to be protected from words. And so, I think at this point, it's politically incorrect to say the sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is no longer a thing. There's some people, Alice, I'm sure you've heard it, they think that words are terrorism. They feel like it's a form of terrorism or a form of violence against them if you say words to them that they don't like. And it's like, no, that's not the definition of violence. Again, we can't agree on the most basic concepts. All right, so let me ask you this, Alice. Kind of wrapping things up here, but did you think were you surprised that President Trump won? I was surprised. I was surprised he got out of the primary. As a talk radio host, it was a very confusing time for me. I'll be perfectly honest. I was very confused. I was questioning. But just tell me what you thought. When Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, what was going through your head?
Well, to me, it actually wasn't that surprising. Only because I'm from the coast of Mississippi, and I had seen him speak in Biloxi, and had seen the way that people reacted to the way he spoke. And coming out of a marketing major, I took a lot of design classes. And one thing we learn in design is that for every movement, there is a counter movement. And I think prior to Trump, a lot of people had just become really frustrated with the direction that things were going. And I think Trump getting elected was a counter movement to everything that happened during those years, a swing back in the other direction. So to me, it just seemed like the natural course of things.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We're gonna leave things there. Alice Norman, for our Conservative Future segment. I really appreciate you being on the program, and I'd love to do it again sometime soon.
Thanks so much, Paul.
All righty, folks. That concludes things. We're gonna take a break here, reset.